All right. Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1,000,000 Relationships Podcast. And you know what? We just hit a milestone here with this episode, Alexandra. This is the 200th episode of the $1,000,000 Relationships Podcast. So uh, I am even more excited for this conversation today because this is kind of a big deal. I want to give Patty Block a shout out because after I interviewed Patty for the podcast a little bit back, she was like, Kevin, you absolutely need to interview Alexandra for the podcast. She would be an amazing person for you to interview. And so, Patty, thank you for connecting Alexandra and I. And Alexandra, here we are. And so, welcome. I am so awesome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Kevin. And thank you, Patty. I'm giving you a shout out as well and talk about relationships. I mean, Patty is a new relationship that I have, and she's phenomenal. I mean, she always has other people top of mind.
Yes.
And she's referred me to so many people for podcasts. And I just love Patty. She's great. She checks in. I love her voice. She's very calming. She must have been a great podcast guest for you.
She was,
She's
and you're
such a
right.
great voice.
She has just got this incredible sense of peace and calmness about her, for sure. Yeah. So, well, what I'd like to, just start with, Alexandra, is just to turn it over to you a little bit so that we can set a little bit of context and have you share, about, what do you do? Who do you serve? What inspires you most about the work that you do? And we'll just start there, Alexandra.
Okay, that's a lot of questions. So, okay, in a nutshell, what I do, I have a really interesting job. I run a naming firm that specializes in creating brand names, and the name of my business is Eat My Words. And I named this Eat My Words because I started out naming things that make people fat and drunk. And I just thought that was a fun name. And it was a great way to, I think if you have a naming firm, you should have a clever name. Yeah. So yeah, Eat My Words fit. And so I've been doing this. I started out my career as an advertising copywriter and then got into naming. But my claim to fame, so I've had Eat My Words for 18 years.
Okay.
My claim to fame is that I named the Wendy's Baconator. So if you have ever eaten a Baconator, you have literally eaten my words.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I name all kinds of things, from robots to racehorses. Ironically, I know Chat GPT is like everybody's talking about it these days. And I have used it quite a bit to help me, help fuel my brainstorming. But the last 4 companies that I've hired Eat My Words have been AI companies. So I'm not too concerned about being replaced quite yet. Yeah, some of my favorite names that I've come up with is I named a frozen yogurt franchise Spoon Me. There's a language school in Cali, Colombia that I named Gringo Lingo. And another one that I did is a cupcake shop in Denver that I named the Church of Cupcakes.
Nice.
So yeah, I have a lot of fun. And their tagline is Worshipers Welcome. So we love names that lend themselves to wordplay or just, we did a GPS for dogs and named it Retriever. So we like names that create a smile either on your face or in your mind.
Yeah. Very cool. And so you've been doing it for 16 years now.
18 years. 18 years. And okay. Before that, I was a copywriter for almost as many years.
Oh, wow. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And having a background as a copywriter has been tremendously helpful because I can write all my own content, on my website. Oh, and I'm just going to give a plug for my website because it's really fun. It's called Eat My Words. It's eatmywords.com. Yep. And if you're curious about names, there's a lot of information there. If you want to test how strong your name is, there's a free name test there. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I know you spent some time there, Kevin.
I did, right. I was telling you before we hit the record that when Patty connected you and I, and she sent that email, before I even responded, I went to your website and I saw the thing about Retriever. I'm like, how cool is that? And you're right. The website is a lot of fun because it shows a lot of examples of companies that you've helped, and it's just like, wow. I was like, what really came up for me, Alexandra, and I know I shared this with you before we hit the record button. I was like, you know what? She's got a real gift. My mind don't work that way. And Alexandra has a real gift for this. And it definitely shows loud and clear by looking at your website and so many of the examples of the companies that you've helped and stuff. And it's just, well, it's evident seeing you on video now and seeing the smile on your face so much. You just love doing what you do.
I love doing what I do. I was just on a call with a client getting briefed on a project, and like I already came up with the name, and I had to tell them on the phone, and of course I have to go through a full exploration with them, but just like it's fun for me that I can come up with ideas. I mean, sometimes I'm like a circus animal and I can perform on command. Not always, but yeah, the longer I do this, the more practice I've had, the more names I've thought of. And yeah, I love my job. I absolutely love it.
So for you, what's the most inspiring thing, Alexandra, about the work that you do and the impact that you get to make in helping these companies?
I love making people smile. And I love seeing somebody's face when I tell them our names, just how they light up, and it's just, I get such a thrill out of it, and I know after having my own, fun business name for a long time, how much people love it. And I love helping people, especially like the ones that are really gratifying are the before and afters, where a company comes to us with a name that they've either outgrown or it's not working for them because it has a weird spelling, or it's nobody knows what it means, or it's hard to pronounce, or they're being sued for trademark infringement, or threatened with it. So they come to us with one name, and then when we're done, they have a brand new name and they love it. And it's such a dramatic improvement. One, like a couple that we've done, one was a education platform and it was named Edio, EDIO. And yes, it's short, but so what if your name is short, if it's not memorable or it doesn't mean anything, it's not a good name. It's better to have a longer name. So we rebranded them Head Rush, and Head Rush is just fun. Like Head Rush is, a kid would put that on a sticker with Head Rush on their skateboard, right? Yeah. Like, so, another before and after is we worked on renaming a bank that was more than 100 years old. It was a regional bank in Kansas, but it was called First National Bank of Syracuse. So it sounded like they were out of, New York. Yeah. And not Syracuse, Kansas. So they had a number of branches. They were an award-winning bank. They were very modern, but they had an old school name, First National Bank of Syracuse. So they wanted a name that was more of a, maverick name, aspirational. So we rebranded them Dream First. Wow. So they kept first in their name. They kept first in the name, but now they're Dream First. So, because their tagline was making dreams come true. And that's what they do as a bank. They give people money. Yep. So yeah, those are two that I really, really like. But on our website, there's a whole bunch of before and afters, and those just bring me so much joy. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a great example. And you're right. If I think about, the company Edio, it's like, what Edio? What is that? And there's lots of companies with names like that, with the weird spelling, and you're like, what is that? Like, there's a big disconnect there. Yeah, it is a disconnect. That's a great word. And the reason I think that, people are so desperate to get an available domain name that they'll sacrifice vowels, letters, just to get that domain. And it's easy just to add a modifier to your name. So, if I didn't have eatmywords.com, we could be Eat My Words Names, Eat My Words Branding, Eat My Words Naming. And so, I always encourage people, just add a modifier word. You can put a verb in front, get, enjoy, you could do we are, hello. But the domain names that I really love are ones that are very clever. So some quick examples. I'll just give you my favorite example. It's a smoked turkey company. So, turkey mail order.
Okay.
It doesn't have a great company name. It's called Greenberg Smoked Turkeys. And of course, Berg could be spelled URG or ERG. So they didn't have a great name, but they weren't going to change their name. But their domain name is unforgettable. And it's gobblegobble.com.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, you're right. That is unforgettable. Yeah. And the name now, it's like, as soon as we're done here, I'm gonna have to go check it out, because it just creates curiosity,
Yeah.
And so
yes.
yeah, for sure. That's awesome. All right, so now that we've got a little bit of context set, and one thing comes through loud and clear, Alexandra, you love the work that you do, and there's no hiding that. So I want to shift gears just a little bit, and I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So have you ever been introduced or met a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Alexandra, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Okay, yes, I have. So before I I tried really hard to break into the naming business, but I don't have a background. I don't in, linguistics or anything like that. So I tried, I would like trying to get my foot in the door at this big international branding firm called Landor and Associates. And at the time I was living in San Francisco, and their headquarters was, right in my own backyard, 2 miles from my house. So I tried everything I could. I sent photos of my dog and all the names I came up with for my dog, and like nothing was working. And this is before LinkedIn. This is, everything was, I didn't know anyone. I got the name of like some guy there. So I was sending stuff to him, but no response. And it was frustrating because I really wanted to be a namer. So fast forward, a year or so, I'm going on a Match.com date with this guy named Samir. And we're going to a cocktail party, and I'm kind of shy in situations with new people. So I said, tell me who's going to be there. So he kind of reeled off the list of some people. And then he said, oh, and my friend Anthony, he works at Landor. And I'm like, oh, what? Someone that works at Landor? And what does he do? And he's like, I don't know. Like, he's in the naming department, head of naming or something. And I'm like, oh my God, so I go to grab my cards, which I always kept by the door. And I was a freelance copywriter at the time. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm getting my cards. I want to meet your friend Anthony. And he's like, Alexandra, it's Saturday night. This is a cocktail party, not a networking party. Leave your cards at home. And I was like, but Samir, you don't understand. I've been trying to get a job there. And he's like, look, every time my friends meet my friend Anthony, and he says he's a namer, they're like, oh, I'm really good at naming things. And it's so, cringy and embarrassing because people aren't good. And I'm like, no, but I am good at this. I have named some things. So he kind of rolled his eyes, and I grabbed some cards and I shoved them in my tiny little purse, and off we went. So on the way over in the car, I'm like trying to think, what have I named? What have I named? And I'm like, okay, because I had named some things. So I'm like thinking of all this stuff, so I'm not caught off guard when Samir introduces me to Anthony. Well, guess what? We got to the party, and Samir would not introduce me to Anthony. No, and it was in a crowded bar, and he wouldn't tell me who Anthony was. So I had to spend the first hour of the party eavesdropping on every conversation, like kind of like leaning back and, and I'm super shy at parties if I don't know people. This is why I love to have parties, because then people will come up and introduce themselves to me. But I had no idea who Anthony was. So finally, I hear this guy in a top hat introduce, somebody says his name, Anthony. The guy wearing the top hat is Anthony. Okay. So now I got to break in. So I mosey on in and I introduced myself to Anthony and everybody. And Anthony looks me straight in the eye and says, Alexandra, what do you do? I totally lied. I said, I'm a product namer. And he's like, no, I'm a namer. And I'm like, really? And he's like, well, why haven't I heard of you? And the naming world's very small. Why haven't I heard of you? I'm like, I don't know. I came out of copywriting. And he's like, well, what have you named? So thank goodness I had gone through that, the highlight reel in my mind on the way over. So I reeled them all off and I had named some cool things. So I named beauty products for the Gap and some startups. So Anthony looks at me and he said, do you have a card? So of course I pretended that I did not know if I had a card. And I'm like, I don't know, let me look. So I'm like digging around in my purse, pretending to look for a card, but a small stack of them in there. And so while I'm digging, looking in my purse, I see Samir. I'm like, kind of look back at the bar and Samir's sitting at the bar and he's watching me, right? And I gave him the biggest F you look, right? I got you. I found him and I'm going to give him my card. Like, watch this, Samir. So I gave Anthony my card and a couple weeks later, Anthony's assistant called. They put me on a project for Frito-Lay. Soon I became the go-to freelancer for Landor, both in San Francisco, Chicago, Frankfurt, and Landor sent me enough business to open my own firm. And so, yeah, Anthony was that person. Like, if it wasn't for Anthony Shore, I wouldn't be where I am now, or it would have taken me a lot longer to get there. So yeah, Anthony is the guy. And okay, so fast forward, so Anthony and I are still friends, colleagues, all this. He's no longer at Landor. And when Anthony left Landor to start his own naming firm, I was able to help him, like tell him, okay, here's, these are some things to know having your own firm. So we've had a great relationship. Now, Samir, whatever happened to Samir? Samir takes full credit for launching my naming career. And yeah, Samir. So I came clean to Anthony. I came clean to him. The story's been published in the paper now. And but yeah, it's a funny story. But yeah, Anthony Shore is that guy.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. And you know what? It really shows your resourcefulness and how you went into this party, this event, kind of being out of your comfort zone. In fact, I wouldn't say kind of being, I'd say like really being out of your comfort zone. But yet, look how resourceful you were, just kind of like listening quietly, trying to hear people like, okay, I got to find who's talking about Anthony and find out and just narrow this down and which person is Anthony and stuff. And that is the sign of a true entrepreneur right there, is resourcefulness, And so with Anthony, you say you guys, so this was like over 16 years ago that this happened. And you guys are still friends to this day and stuff. You and Anthony are.
Yep.
Not so much Samir, but you and Anthony.
Samir. Yeah, but Samir, if I reach out to Samir, I'd hear back from him every once in a while. When I wrote my book, I let Samir know. Like, how crazy is it that Samir is like just mortified that I'm going to try to meet his friend Anthony. And now I have a book, 10 years ago, my book first came out, the first edition. Hello, my name is awesome. How to create brand names that stick. And I thank Anthony. I thank a bunch of the namers, because all the namers have been not all of them, but a lot of them have been incredibly helpful and great mentors to me, and like just ingratiated me into their exclusive club, because it's a cool job to have. So that I think is hilarious. I sent Samir a book.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I want to ask a follow-up question now, and I love asking this follow-up question because, there has been a lot of water and some time under the bridge since this interaction between you and Anthony. And if you look at what has come from that, I'm sure you could come up with lots of examples. So I just want to, have you narrow it down to just whatever comes to mind for you as I'm asking this question. But over the last 16 years, where because of this relationship with Anthony and that's led to, what is an example of something? And I know, I don't want to, you might bring that up. So you shared a cool thing with me before we hit the record button, but so I'm sure you got a ton more examples, but what is an example where you have been able to make a really big impact in the world? But you also know hands down that would have never happened if not for this relationship that you and Anthony have had.
Well, by Anthony giving me work at Landor, that was fantastic credibility for me to be working for them because they are really the premier branding firm. So because of that, when I started on LinkedIn, I started reaching out to people that had worked at Landor because I knew they were unemployed. I reached out for people that were looking for jobs because I knew those are people that would want to meet other people. And I met this guy through Anthony named Ed Rice, and he was between jobs at the time, and he had been a big account executive there. Okay. And I reached out to Ed. Ed started opening all of these doors for me. And like when we met, we probably had, 2 people in common on LinkedIn. And now we have hundreds of people in common on LinkedIn. But just the projects I got by knowing Ed, I mean, I live my Barbie dream home, and I drive my Barbie dream car. So it's all, I credit, everything is like 6 degrees of separation. And I always think about that stuff, like what leads back to what. Yeah. And yeah, a lot leads back to Ed Rice, but I don't think I would have had the credibility to meet him if I didn't have Landor as part of my, oh, hey, I'm freelancing for Landor. I would just be some rando chick, but instead I had credibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine too, that also led to you just having a lot of confidence in your own abilities, having that relationship and stuff too. It just kind of boosts because, you start doing it and now it's like, dang, you know what? I'm pretty doggone good at this stuff.
Yeah. Well, Anthony he was such a great creative director and mentor too. Like I can, you can remember things that people say to you, like that just stick with you. And like one time he said, your names are infectious in a good way. And like, I remember that just made me feel so good. And that's the way to get better work out of me. Just tell me I'm doing a good job and I'll do even better job. Yeah, but no, that's definitely been, and I'm sure if I like really sat down and mapped it all out, I can attribute a lot to that. But having that Landor, as part of my background it's priceless, really.
Yeah. Well, and and that's one of the things that, I've felt this way for many years that, as entrepreneurs, our most valuable asset is the relationships in our life. Everything else stems from that. And, hosting this podcast over the last couple of years has really just, caused me to see that so much more, because I've interviewed so many entrepreneurs that as I ask these questions, they're like, and to like really look at the ripple effect of what's come from, Anthony and Ed and, and all that's come and all these other relationships and all these companies that you've served and these, because these companies, they have all their staff that is impacted. They have their clients that they serve that are impacted because of what you do. And so the ripple effect and the impact that you've made in the world through doing what you do, you will never truly know. But I can tell you, it's massive. It's absolutely massive. And and it's such a testament to the power of relationships.
Thank you. Can I tell you a story about the impact
Absolutely.
I've had? Okay, so one time I was speaking at a conference that my publisher was having, a marketing conference, and there was a guy in the audience. So I talked about Spoon Me. I always tell the Spoon Me story because it's such a great story of the name and everything they've done with the name. So there was a guy in the audience named Seth Adam Smith, and he wrote this blog post called, he was an intern at my publisher at the time. He wrote a blog post called "Marriage is Not for You." And it was all about, which is a really arresting title, right? And it had been viewed like 14 million times. And it was all about how marriage is for the other person, for your spouse. And then he ended up writing a book about it. So he was in the audience, and he's a member of the LDS Church, Mormons, as people know that name maybe a little more. So Seth told me that he came up to me after my talk and he said, you're not going to believe this, but when I was going to school at BYU, I really like this woman named Kim, and I had to move her out of the friend zone, and I didn't know how. So then I had an idea, and so he told me he took her to Spoon Me. They went to Spoon Me, and she got the hint. So he moved her out of the friend zone to the girl, eventually to the girlfriend zone. And now she's been in the wife zone for years, and they have, married, kids, everything. And I'm so excited that, like, wow, I had a little something to do with that. That made me feel so good.
What a cool story. What a cool story. Yeah, I mean, that would make you feel awesome, and I bet you have just lots and lots of stories like that, And well, Alexandra, I want to, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. Hey, this has been so awesome. And you have just this amazing energy about you. And for anybody listening to this, and I know you shared your website earlier stuff, but I want to, give you, because I guarantee you there's people listening to this going, wow, Kev, you know what? I love Alexandra's energy. I love just how she shows up. And I want to just make sure we like give them, don't leave them hanging. Let's like let them know where they can go to find out more, or any resources you have. And you can talk about your book if you want, whatever you feel led to share, Alexandra.
Okay, well, like I said, my website is eatmywords.com. You can click on test a name if you want to test a name. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you connect with me, please tell me you heard me on the show, so I don't think you're some random stranger trying to sell me something. And if you are, please don't try to sell me anything. And yeah, I have a free mini masterclass on my website. There's all kinds of, educational material. I have an online course. And then that's kind of it. There's, I'll give you the links, will be in the show notes, I trust.
Yes,
to all of my stuff. There's and if you want to work with me, there's, contact me through the website, and let's work together.
Yeah, very good. Well, okay, so one last question. Any last thing you feel like led to share before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, I would just tell people, like if you're listening, not watching, you can't see my background, but I surround myself with really colorful, fun things. And if anyone wants to just be a little more creative, surround yourself with color and toys, like just things that are fun. Because it kind of puts you in a frame of being a little more childlike and fun, playful in your thinking, and not so serious.
Yeah. And I want to point out, so there's, for anybody listening to the podcast, not seeing it on the video, there is, she's got a copy of her book back there. Hello, my name is awesome. She's got a license plate that says Namer on it. And I love the Barbie car. She got a Barbie car sitting on the shelf that you and you reference. I get to live in my Barbie house and I drive my Barbie car.
Yeah.
and so and I mean, one thing, like I said, and I've mentioned this before, Alexandra, I just really just love the way you show up. you just have this, you're just a lot of fun. You just have a ton of energy, great energy. You have a really amazing, unique ability in doing what you do. And I want to, just thank you again for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm really excited to share this interview with our listeners. And yeah, thanks so much again. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I don't think I've ever told the Anthony story on a podcast. So, and I'm on a podcast at least twice a week. So that was a fun question, and I'm glad I got to share that.
Yeah, I am too. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kevin.